the transition, I guess, to with my oldest, because I have a good relationship with his mother. I want to kind of be that guy that like encourages him to be on his own and gain his independence as quickly as possible without wanting him to fail. But at the same time, I definitely don't want to hold his hand too much, just because I don't want him to lean on that dependency as he transitions into adult, especially as a man. Just like, hey, I need to realize I need to grab my own footing. Depending on people, having people to depend on is nice, but having to depend on people is not ideal.
My friend, you are so important. Your role as a father is critical. I believe as you step into your identity as a father, you will change the world, not just today, but for generations. 3 things that stuck out to me from my conversation with Joey today are: 1, fatherhood is a duty and a choice. 2, as a father, you should be working to work yourself out of a job. Love that part. And 3, sometimes you just got to let your kids fight. Welcome to Fatherhood Field Notes Podcast, where I interview incredible fathers, gaining wisdom from their stories for you and I to grow in our craft. I'm your guide, Ned Shout, father to 5 kiddos, currently ages 11 to 18, and husband to my rad wife, Sarah, working on our 21st year of marriage. So yeah, I am in the thick of it, and I am working daily to rebel against the low expectations for fathers and create a world where fathers know who they are and show up for their families. You and I have been given the greatest opportunity to impact our world through the way we embrace our fatherhood role. This episode is brought to you by the Adventure of Fatherhood, helping men discover their powerful fatherhood role and build their fatherhood skills. The role of the father is to serve, guide, steward, protect, and of course, find joy and have fun in the messiness of it all. Today's guest is my friend Joey Hahn, an incredibly resilient man. He spent 13 years in the United States Navy as a special operator first class, a Navy SEAL, serving our country and gaining more awards than I could list here. Today, we dig into his life as a father leading 4 boys. Enjoy meeting my friend, Joey. All right, Joey, certified badass. Welcome to Fatherhood Field Notes. Thank you so much for being here. How are you feeling today?
Good. Excited to be here. I appreciate you taking the time to interview me. Don't forget that I am also a former child and tank top connoisseur. So,
you know what? Okay, so that's why I'm a little peeved right now. At the moment, is I was like, oh sheesh, I like saw all your hilarious stuff on Instagram, and I went and dug and found my favorite tank top in my dirty laundry, and I was like, this is what I'm gonna wear because this guy's definitely gonna have a tank top, and so it's kind of like, this one's pretty old. It's like a kind of like a pair of underwear. Yeah, it's like a pair of underwear though. Like you've had it for a while. It just feels right when you put it on. Yeah. So, anyways, maybe yours are all packed up, since you just moved.
Yeah, most part. The few that I have on hand, because I always have reserves, are in the dirty laundry. Being the day of the week, we went to the range today. It was kind of rainy, and I hit straight home from work. But I'm embarrassed for not wearing the tank top right now. So definitely give me all the hell you can. It's greatly appreciated. But Quicksilver, man, I don't even think they make that brand anymore. I haven't seen those in stores in a while.
It's been a minute. So Andy Arabito is the one who referred you to come on the show. Now, I think one of the greatest compliments somebody can get is when I ask, hey, who's a great dad, right? Not just who's an awesome Navy SEAL or a great leader, has a great business, or is very successful. Like, those are all great accolades, but to say, hey, who's a great dad, and him go, oh, you got to talk to Joey. You got to have him on the podcast. Why do you think you come top of mind for Andy when he's thinking of a short list of dudes that he would say is a great father?
Man, I first met Andy very, very young in my career. Andy was only a couple classes ahead of me. Both West Coast guys, hit it off instantly. And he's definitely been around. I have 4 sons now, but he's been around since the birth of all of them, from the very first one, after my first Iraq deployment, to my last one, who's a 6 now, back and born in 2018. And he's always somebody that is super excited to start a family someday. So he's always talking to guys about fatherhood and stuff like that. And he always asks me how my boys are doing, and he's always excitable. Basically, vicariously living through the good dads and guys with good families in his circle. So don't want to say I'm very humbled that he thinks I'm one of the great dads. I definitely don't think of myself as extraordinary by any means. I've definitely worked with some extraordinary men and been surrounded by extraordinary guys in the teams. I'm just grateful that I got to participate in a lot of their lives, and it's kind of the same way I feel with fatherhood and my boys. Like, I wouldn't say I was a great dad, and we all make our mistakes, and sometimes I look at myself going, man, I hope I'm doing a good job. But there's small moments during the day, during the week, and definitely one of those moments where, like, all right, as long as they think that I'm the greatest dad in their eyes, then I guess I'm doing something right.
Yeah. Yeah. So good, man. We're going to get back to some questions about your sons and family, but question is, how old do you find yourself today?
How old do I find myself today? Man, I'm a 41-year-old body with a 78-year-old mentality and engine, I guess. I've definitely lived full bore with most of my life, my career. Sustained a decent amount of injuries. And so when I wake up in the morning, sometimes I feel like I'm 70 or 80, feeling like, man, I can't even get out of bed. But yeah, as far as the age, as they say, the age is 41. So I'm 41, but the mileage is definitely way up there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, man, thank you for giving so much of yourself so that you and I can just sit on 2 Zoom calls from 2 very comfortable rooms in different places of the world and just talk about life. We're very blessed to be able to do things like this. How many years you been married, Joey?
I got married I married my wife in the courthouse, and then we had an official wedding in 2017, but 2016. So she already had my first son with her. I was married previously, and then it's one of those things. I was very hesitant on continuing getting married. My current wife was super understanding about it. She never really pressured me, even when she was pregnant with our first son together. She got pregnant with our second son. Still no pressure, no issues. And then I started kind of getting a little dad guilt, I guess.
Yeah.
Super awesome woman sticking me through deployments. And I was like, you know what? Because I want to make sure they have all the benefits and stuff that carries on with being my son, being active duty. But B, it was about time because she was fully committed to the family aspect of it. So we got married officially in July of 2016. And then we had our wedding and party and stuff in December of 2017.
Beautiful. Awesome. And then where do you guys do life?
Currently, we're back in Virginia Beach. We bounced around. It's like being in the military, but not in the military anymore. So I medically retired in 2017 from Virginia Beach. I was on the East Coast SEAL team. And then we moved to Texas, or Oklahoma, then Texas, just trying to adjust to civilian life, looking for work. Got into the weapons and tactics training world. And then I got linked up with my buddy's company, GVRS Group. He wanted me to come on full time as the director in training, so run all their training and organize all that and be one of their lead instructors. And so we moved back to Virginia Beach, and that's where I'm currently residing in our house about a weekish. Now I got a bunch of boxes and stuff surrounding me right now, but things are good. I got a roof over my head, food on the table, and that's about as much as I can ask for right now.
Yeah, man. Beautiful. And then you have 4 sons. So what are the ages of the boys?
So my oldest son is 17. He recently just graduated high school, getting into college at a technical institute. He's all about computer programming and stuff like that. My next one actually turns 10 tomorrow, Blake. And then my next one is 8 years old, and then my youngest is 6. So mini fire team there. They're all rambunctious, all completely different personalities, all decently smart, which is a proud moment for me. But yeah. So
yes.
My oldest one's in college, and the other 3 they'll start elementary school. So they'll all be at elementary school this year. They start at the end of this month. So Mama's ready for them to go back to school. They're over summer and over the move. So
yeah. Yeah, man, my oldest is 18 and she goes to Boise State next week. We fly her out Tuesday. So it's like super crazy because we live in Hawaii. We moved here a few years ago from California. And it's like, man, it's been this way for a while. 11 years. My youngest is 11. I got 5 kids. And so it's like the youngest is 11. And so for the last 11 years, it's been the 7 of us. and like it's all going to change. And it's funny because you said they're all decently smart, and it's like I'm excited for Brooklyn, and I'd be more bummed if she was just like staying here, like not doing anything, you know? But it is sad. Do you feel the same way? Is it anything different for a son than a daughter? I mean, what do you think?
Man, it's hard because all I have is boys. It's
Yeah.
funny because my older brother, I have an older brother, and he has nothing but girls. He has three girls. His oldest is 23. He actually turned 23 today.
Hmm.
And the other two are pretty much the same age range as my youngest ones. So he knows all about the girl stuff. It's definitely got to be different with girls than boys. My wife comes from a family of nothing but girls. Pretty much the only male in that whole family dynamic on her side was her dad and her uncles and stuff. But her mom had a bunch of sisters. Her dad has a sister. So she was kind of thrown in for a loop, and all of a sudden I started giving her boys. But
Yeah.
dinosaurs and ninjas and army men's. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think
First. Yeah.
the the transition, I guess, to with my oldest, because I have a good relationship with his
Hmm.
mother. I know that's different with dads and daughters and moms and sons. Uh, I want to kind of be that guy that like encourages him to be on his own and gain his independence as quickly as possible without wanting him to fail. But at the same time, I definitely don't want to hold his hand too much, just because I don't want him to lean on that dependency as he transitions into adult.
Yeah.
Of as especially as a man, just like, hey, I need to realize I need to grab my own footing. Depending on people, having people to depend on is nice, but having to depend on people is not ideal. Is the best way to
Hmm.
put it, right? It's
Hmm.
always good to have that community to know that, hey, if I need people to depend on, that's good. But if you're depending on that dependency, that's where a whole lot of people kind of fail in that adult transition. And yeah, I told my son, because everybody's like, "Oh, you're going to encourage him to join the Navy, go to the military." I was like, "I'm going to talk to him, see what he wants to do, and definitely at least encourage him to get a job. Start becoming a productive member of society." But I definitely don't want to cut him off and just kind of be like, "All right, good luck, dude. I'll call you in a few weeks, and hopefully you make it." Kind of attitude.
Yeah.
But no, I definitely empathize with you with that piece, because the family dynamic definitely changes when just even one family member kind of transitions out of the household. Definitely have a good amount of guy buddies that have all their kids transition out, but that, I mean, you're used to that number. That's the crew, and even one person gone for like summer camp or stuff, everything's just kind of off and weird. But that
Yeah.
transition out of the house to bigger, better things is definitely something that changes the whole dynamic of day to day. It's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, my next question, so I typically ask, like, what's the role of the father? So, you're at a unique spot because if I asked, if we just had a couple of 1-year-olds, it's like we'd have all these aspirations of what we think fatherhood should be and what we're going to do with our sons over the next, 17, 18 years. And let me back up with this part. I had a friend of mine, his son just graduated high school, kind of floundering a little bit, didn't know what he wants to do. And the dad called me just like struggling, like, dude, was I a good dad? Did I do a good job? So from your perspective of like kind of starting to launch one out, what would you describe the role of the father as?
So definitely it changes and
Hmm.
evolves over time. Like you mentioned, when they were a baby, it's not much you can do as a father. A lot of that stuff is kind of falls on the mother as far as the nurturing, nutrition, and growth piece. But kind of being that solid rock for them, a good protector,
Hmm.
provider, kind of some of the stuff I mentioned before in the notes. So protector, provider, um, dependable. But the role of the father is basically helping that unit, because basically when they're younger, the mother and the child is a unit. Basically mentoring that piece and making sure that he starts to develop. But once they start getting their own personality, start getting cognitive thought, then you kind of transition into that teacher role. Uh,
Hmm.
Leadership is a huge thing. Lead by example is a big thing. How you interact with people when they're around and when they're not around. It's definitely tough for some people. They will have this father hat, but when they go out with their buddies and friends, I'm guilty of it too. When my oldest was younger, I'd act one way at home in front of him, but when I go out, I'd act like a complete young idiot because at the time I was in my mid 20s. But growing and maturing, you kind of realize like, hey, wearing those two hats, sometimes it gets kind of skewed, and you want to lead by example, and you want to be that person that shows your son or your daughter how they should be treated or how they should treat people.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, most children, they learn more from their parents, wherever that's in foster care, negative or positive, or anywhere else, parents, grandparents, whoever they live with, than they do in school amongst their peers and whatnot. Yes, they do get a lot of that information, and some of those characteristics they develop and personality traits they develop through people they interact with. But the biggest implant of who they are comes from who they interact with the most, and being that person they want to connect with, and connecting with them is a huge part of being a father, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, man, so good. I love talking about how to be treated and how to treat others. And it's like it's nice. It's a lot of work having a big family, but it's nice because it's easy to have like 1,000 conversations a day about how you should treat your brother or your sister, right? So that's beautiful. One thing you said in the notes that stuck out to me, and I'd love you to kind of expand upon it. You said gentle, but capable of violence. And I think, as a society, a lot of men have kind of like stepped away from realizing their power and what they're capable of. And I think it's, why don't you tell me what you think about that?
So some of that is kind of from my time in the Navy. I guess it's better wording for all fathers, whether they're in the military or not, is gentle but strong, right? So knowing that your son or your daughter can come to you with the smallest issue is important, because they need that trust, and that knowing that, hey, dad's not just a stone rock that will protect me from all the evil in the outside world. I can come to him and know that he will understand me and listen to me if I have the smallest complaints and smallest gripes. Like, I've definitely been exposed to those guys who, like I said, they're built like a stone rock. They're solid, huge guys, very intimidating to the outside world. And it's like one of those things like, man, if I got in a bar fight, I wouldn't want to fight you. But at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want your kids thinking like that about you. You don't want your kids to be like, man, if I ever grow up and have to get in a fight, I don't want to fight my dad because he scares the hell out of me.
Mm-hmm.
It should be, I want to fight with my dad because I know that he will win, and kind of have that trust in and bond between yourself and your children, that they will protect, you will protect their feelings and who they
Mm.
are as individuals. Yes, there's times when I use my dad voice, and they know like, hey, dad means business. But at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day, if they look up to me and say, hey, I just had a nightmare, can we talk about it or something like that, they don't realize I'm not going to belittle them or degrade them or make them feel like
That's
whatever
huge.
they're feeling at the moment is less than what it should be. Because I know I come back from a generation that was raised by a generation of, hey, suck it up, be a man, and all that
Right.
stuff. There's some truth to that, but at the other side, there's also truth to vulnerability, and how important that is, managing that vulnerability, who you can be vulnerable with, and knowing that sometimes working through those vulnerabilities helps you grow more than just sucking it up and kind of tucking it away and growth. So with that piece, being gentle but strong, I guess is a better way to put that. Knowing that, hey, I can depend on my dad, and at the same time, he's gentle enough to understand and talk to and approach to with whatever problem I got.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple thoughts on it. I mean, uh, I think in our culture we want to either be gentle and soft and what's our feelings and blah blah blah, or we want to be the far other side. And I think as dads we have to be both. We have to be both. Now the reason why I did like the word violent is because the word strong is great, but I just don't think men really realize how much they're capable of, like how powerful they are. And so the word violent, it could be used negatively, right? Like, so be careful because you have the potential to cause havoc, but then also know that you have power if that violence is needed.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree. The biggest thing, obviously raising sons myself, but as you grow as a father, you got to be able, hey, like I'm capable of violence, but I'm able to manage it. Like I'm not a violent person.
Right. Yes,
But
exactly.
I'm not a violent person, but I can instill violence in the face of danger, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what that may be, whether it may be, you know, a person, place, or thing, right? So, bad people, bad environment. So, if you roll into something that starts turning bad, whether it's a storm or a flat tire, I mean, that's a bad example to put towards violence, but being able to conjure up the strength you need to stand your ground in whatever situation that may be. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, even in those examples, I think a lot of men are moving to this passivity of like, well, let's call somebody to help us,
yeah,
versus realizing like I have power inside of me to take control, or at least enter into this situation with some a bit of authority.
yeah,
Even if I'm struggling through it, like I'm capable of. And I think some men are just not realizing they're capable, and that's where I think a lot of like you're just not respected. Your wife doesn't respect you. Your kids don't respect you because you're not stepping into, because you're thinking you just need to be this gentle guy who doesn't have any like real emotion of I don't know,
yeah.
frustration or whatever. When did you embrace fatherhood? So, you have your 17-year-old, your young dad, and then you have additional kids. I think some dads, it's like when they first hear they're going to be a dad, it's when they see their firstborn, it's when their kid walks or talks or whatever. When for you was it like, dang, this matters big time?
Uh, so it was actually probably before my firstborn. Um,
Hmm.
Growing up in foster care, I didn't really know my dad. Uh, so my mom died real young when I was like 4, cervical cancer. My dad really struggled with that mentally and physically. So got taken into foster care about 5 years old. I guess just his absence growing up. So I would say probably a teenager. I always thought about what kind of relationship I could have had with my dad. I had
Hmm.
some pretty bad foster homes that I went through. That there wasn't really a good, strong father figure that I really could trust and lean on as far as showing me how to be a man. And that kind of basically I was showed all the things that a man shouldn't do during my time in foster care to kind of realize like, hey, I got to do all the opposite stuff that was ever done to me growing up. And I kind of had that mentality in the back of my head that, I always had no doubt. It's like, I'm going to become a father one day. I'm going to be the guy. And if my son looks at me up every night and says, hey, Dad, I love you, you're doing great,
Hmm.
then that's going to be my measure of success, no matter whether I become, an astronaut or, a janitor at McDonald's. As long as my kids are taken care of and they know that Dad will always be there, because my father wasn't. So then fast forward to when I found out I was having my firstborn. That was He was born in 2007. So I found out, uh, during deployment, October 2006, uh, and kind of that little shift of more than selflessness and sacrifice, and like, man, like that from the back of my head that I've always kind of thought about shifted to the front of my head after I found that out. That is probably the full bore, full send was, upon knowing that she was pregnant.
Hmm. Well, dude, thank you for sharing that. And you said you went to like 50 different foster homes.
Yeah, I bounced around a lot. There was initially the goal was to get back with my father and, be a family unit again. It's my brother and sister and I. So bounced around a lot of temporary ones. And then he ended up losing his rights, and then we went to a semi-permanent one until were put up for adoption. That adoption kind of failed, and so we got put back in foster care. Bounced around a few times, was put up for adoption again. Uh, Again, that one failed for my brother and myself. We got put back into foster care and bounced around a couple more times until I graduated high school. So
Hmm.
yeah, it was. I don't say 50 was super accurate because I definitely lost count after a while. I could probably get some of my social records from the state of Texas and do an exact count, but it was a pretty close number. That it was a lot of high turnover rate per se. I
Yeah.
remember staying at foster homes for the weekend through a week at a time, um, and then the last foster home I was at was one of my longest ones. And I still talk to those people. Those people are super wonderful. Wayne and Kathy Ballou. But I got there my junior year of high school. So I was about there for like 2.5 years.
Wow.
It was weird because I was like, man, I wish I would have found these people 10 years ago when I was, 5 or 6, just getting the foster care, because they were such wonderful people. They, being the age I was, a lot of foster homes don't treat you like a son or a daughter or a kid, because especially at that age, you're like, hey, you're super temporary. I don't know you. You're not really interacting with me. So as soon as you turn 18, most foster parents that I ran into would stop talking to the kid, just because it's a job. Most foster parents, they do get compensated for having kids in their home, and a lot of them kind of treat it like that way, like they're fostering puppies or something. So it's just like, oh, these kids are here for a short amount of time. Yes, we're going to make sure they're well fed and they have clothes on their back and whatnot, but it doesn't feel like a home. It doesn't feel like a family. Most of the ones that I went through, until I got to that last one.
Wow, dude. My next question was going to be, from the moment, you're say 15 or high school or whatever, and you're like, damn, one day I'm going to be a dad and I'm not going to have my kid feeling this way, right? Like my kid's going to look up at me and say, I love you, dad, good dad, whatever. How do you go from that moment? Because I would say most 15-year-olds in foster care probably have that thought, right? But then fast forward to you're 40 years old with 4 boys, and that's real. So like, what did that take, right? So why do some just fall into the same shitty past as their, like this upbringing, to you actually became a man and decided to show up as a dad? So can you make any connection of how you did that?
It was just, I guess, just the mindset I had from a young age. I really wanted to know who my dad was. I actually, my high school year, my senior year, I was working with my caseworker, and I had a CASA worker, basically a volunteer the state of Texas has. They helped me get a private investigator to literally find my dad, because that was one thing that always growing up, I always had this relationship in my head with him. I remember when I was like 4 or 5, and just being a dad, it was one of those things that I always wanted to have a relationship with a dad and like a solid father figure. So we did eventually find him. He was kind of into a dark hole of depression still. I've been doing that since my mom died. So he was addicted to drugs and alcohol. Wasn't really interested in restarting a relationship per se, but the fact that I did find him kind of reignited some of that, what I would want to be as a father, and seeing him and semi frustrated with him. I definitely empathize with him, because it was a huge thing to, lose not only your wife, but all 3 of his kids were taken away from him. I mean, he didn't give us up willingly by any means, but it was still huge mental shock. On top of that, with all the addiction stuff he had, he was defeated, and it sucked, because he didn't feel like he was worthy to be our dad, because we were all at that time the only person that was still, like, my little sister was 16 at the time. I was 18. My brother was 19. And I was the main one that was like, you know what? You weren't there for our childhood, which is a big deal, but you can at least be there for us transitioning to adulthood. And I tried to maintain some type of relationship with him. Some of the frustrations I had with him, as far as communication and just, stuff you would talk about with your dad transitioning to adulthood, like all the stuff I had to learn from either school or friends or my last foster parents, changing a tire or changing oil, what how hard work actually feels good. Because being in Texas, I was always hauling hay or doing something during the summer for $5 an hour. Stuff like that I wanted to share with him, that just because he wasn't there for it, that I didn't hold him responsible for it. So just that actual unconditional love. So me giving that to my dad encouraged me to make sure my sons knew that no matter what the exchange was, that unconditional love would always be there.
Yeah. Oh man. And that gift, that opportunity. And it's gnarly to be 18 years old and have to be the one extending that to your father. And I think a lot of us still haven't done that, right? I think there's a lot of men out there who haven't. And I think for you, I mean, this is just my own hearing you share. It's like, that's almost like a rite of passage in its own, of like realizing in this moment, I'm a bit more of a parent. I'm a bit more of like taking responsibility as a man, and I'm going to show you love and unconditional love. And then I'm going to take what I've learned from this and I'm going to go pass that on. And I mean, dude, what a blessing. God gives you 4 boys to then go and get to do that with, to that extent, which is what a beautiful opportunity. With that being said, we talked about it with your son, 17 kind of going off, but what are the couple things that you would want your sons to know at 25 or 30 years old? Like, they're men now. What are the things that you would want them to know? And you're like, yes, these are the things I showed my sons.
One thing is confidence, definitely, in some of their decision makings. I know, especially at 25, there's a bunch of decisions as you transition to that solid adulthood that you have to make. Some are good, some are bad, some are really tough. But it's one of those things that I hope my sons know at 25, know that no matter how difficult it'll be, they're not alone. A lot of men at that age, especially me, I remember sitting there making, I was in college before I joined the Navy. So I joined the Navy at 21. And I was in Iraq, 24, 25. That was my one of my first deployments. And just that piece to know that they're not alone as a man in the world. Because a lot of guys struggle with that, especially when COVID hit and stuff. A lot of guys were by themselves with their families, and that whole piece of, a lot of people, like I said, the old adage of, hey, be a man, suck it up, only you can count on yourself kind of deal. A lot of the mentality is good to a certain extent, but at the same time, there's definitely a community out there. And that bond with me as their father, I hope they realize that no matter what, if they're sitting there completely overwhelmed, just completely discouraged with whatever they have going on in life, whether it's relationships, jobs, that they should always know that they can count on me for that middle of the night 2-hour phone call. It's something that, like I said, growing up and then transitioning out, I always had that itch, like, man, life sucks right now for some reason, whether it's, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, or I'm struggling at my job, or my relationship sucks. My girlfriend just broke up with me. Cause that's about the time, like, stuff, that in high school, it's like, I just go find another girlfriend or whatever, but stacking on top of work and other stressors that actual real life brings to you, it starts getting heavy, and not having somebody to lean on or give that call to. Yeah, the biggest thing, I guess, would be at 25 is like, hey, realize you're not alone. Obviously myself, and I always enjoyed my big brother and my little sister. The sibling aspect is something that I always was like 100% determined to do. I was like, I'll never have a single child. Nothing against people that are single child, growing up, or single child homes. It's just, it's a different type of person that comes from a sibling home. Just the interactions, how they interact with people they just meet, brand new people. Some people, I get it, they can't have more than one kid, which is all right, but extend that family out. Like, everyone's got some type of grandparents or aunts, uncles, and cousins. Keep that group tight, and let them know at the end of the day they're not alone.
Yeah. How have you helped your sons cultivate relationship with each other?
So as they grow, I've tried to let them work through more of their fights together. Usually, as they initially were interacting with each other, brothers are brothers. So the good thing is they can go from 1 second being best friends to next second being a fist fight.
Yeah.
But I've tried to shift the focus from trying to stop them immediately. It's one of those things I want to get involved real quick if they're starting to get a heated argument or things are getting kind of out of control. My wife hates it, by the way. She sometimes will get after me. She goes, "Why don't you go do something?" I was like, let's let them try to work, have some, conflict resolution and develop that. So I think doing that at a young age helps them at an older age. It's one of those things that, as a young kid, into my teenage years, the fist fights and stuff like that, with, foster kids or other kids in school and whatnot. Yeah, it was bad, but at the same time, we were such a young age and so small that it wasn't detrimental. There was nothing permanent, I guess, about it. Bruised, broken nose, bruised eye, some ego sometimes, but in the days, like working through some of that conflict at a younger age, I think helps transition that, and builds confidence as they grow older. It's problem solving. So when they get frustrated, I definitely, when my oldest, when he would get frustrated or needed help, that whole thing, like protector, provider, I jump in and try to help them. But my other ones, as they've grown up, I've tried to take a step back for a second sometimes and let them develop problem solving skills and confidence in working through whatever frustrations that may be, or stuff they really can't figure out. Small things.
Yeah.
Like
you said, go ahead.
Yeah, no, like toys being broken or whatever. Like, hey, my toy's broken, instead of me immediately trying to fix it for him and say, here you go. It's like, all right, well, what are you going to do about this?
Yeah.
You're going to try to fix it, you're going to throw it away. And he's like, oh, I want you to fix it. It's like, no, what are you going to do about it? So trying to encourage them to be self-motivated and kind of grow within themselves at a young age. So as they get older, because it's just like what some Navy chiefs used to tell me all the time. Like, if you're not working yourself out of a job, you're not doing anybody that's underneath you any justice. And that's kind of same thing with fatherhood. If I'm not working my way out of being needed constantly, then
that's good.
I'm not successful as a father. Like, I don't want him to depend on me and call me when he's 25 because he's out of gas or he got to change his tire. Like, it's one of the things, like, at that age, he should be calling me, telling me all the stuff he did accomplish. Like, Dad, I really appreciate you, that you forced me to, fill up my own stuff, because their mother's great, but sometimes she'll cater to them. They're like, hey, my juice is empty, and they're sitting on the couch. I was like, dude, go up and fill up your own juice. You're 8, 9 years old, even the 6-year-old too, because he'll like, oh, my legs don't work, and you can go through all the kid stuff that they do.
Yeah.
I laugh about it at the same time. I mean, I don't do it all the time. There's definitely instances where I'm like, all right, I'm closer or whatever, but I've definitely had my kid come down, and from the downstairs, he'll walk to me. I'm standing right next to the refrigerator. He puts his juice cup down. He goes, my juice is empty. And I was like, well, you better go fill it up, bud. The refrigerator's right there. So trying to work some of that stuff that you provide as a younger child, because they're incapable, and encouraging their capability and letting them grow as young as I can, so that when they get to that preteen age, 10, 11, 12, 13, I expect them to be a little more independent. And like I said, I'm working myself out of a job of being not a complete father, but some of the stuff you do as when they're younger. So work yourself out of a job.
Yeah, dude, I love that. I've never heard it said like that about a father. But like, what if our mindset was, I need to work myself out of a job? Because you're training these human beings how to do life. And I also just love I've been trying to do that with my girls more. I used to step into their cat fights, whatever you want to call them. These girls get crazy. And I realized when I step in sometimes, especially when they're 15, 16 years old, is I do more damage thinking I'm helping. But if I just wait 5-10 minutes, it's like they're cuddling and laughing and whatever 10 minutes later, if I just stay away from it. So I'm learning to give them the space to figure it out, because I'm not going to be there when they're 25 having a fight at the boss or a coworker or a spouse or whatever. So they got to figure out how to manage that. How's your relationship with your siblings now? And maybe while you think about that for a second, I had one brother, and as I think about it now, and I tell my kids this regularly, I wish I was a better brother to my brother in our teens, because if there's one person I want to hang out with now, it's him. It's him. And so I really try to lean into my kids, like, dude, siblings matter. So where are you at with your siblings?
Solid. We've actually always been connected and tight, just because a lot of the foster homes we lived at, we were separated. So we weren't always together. So probably 33% of the time we were together in foster care. The rest, we were either it was either Dennis and Tiffany or Dennis and I, or, all three of us in completely different homes. And then my little sister, she got adopted when she was 8 by the second home. So my brother and I, we went back to foster care, but no one wanted to take 2 teenage boys. So we had to go to 2 separate homes. So we've always been close, always been tight, always really cared and loved each other. I mean, doesn't say my brother and I never fought. I remember 7, 8 years old getting arguments over a glow in the dark toothbrush because I had, and we ended up with literally getting into fist fights over it. But at the end of the deal, we, beat each other to exhaustion, 7 and 8. We're not super strong to actually be hurting each other, but we'd sit there after wrestling, fight, and be angry and just be exhausted and then hug each other. And then we discuss terms to share the glow in the dark toothbrush for the night. And no, it was good times. No, my brother and I are super close. My sister and I are super close. My sister and my brother sometimes have their differences, but I'm definitely the link that kind of keeps them connected. They're both in Texas, so we were all in Texas at one point. But now I talk to my brother pretty much every day. My sister, at least once a week, I try to reach out to her. She's definitely busy with her life and her kids, and she's a physical therapist down in Houston. Physical therapist assistant. She's awesome. She works with special needs people and kids.
Nice.
And she's great. And my brother's a deputy sheriff out in small town Texas out there, doing great work. Like he literally was a truck driver 5 years ago, and then decided that it wasn't for him anymore, and went through the police academy at 39, 40 years old. And so he's been doing that for about 2-3 years now. And of course, he's loving it. He always wanted to come serve with me. He tried to join the Marines out of high school, but they kept telling him he was too big. He was one of those husky Texas boys. So they kept saying, like, hey, for your height, you need to lose this weight. And my brother's just a big guy. So he's like, that's impossible. He's graduated senior. He was, 6'1", 6'2", probably 230, 240, just like a stocky dude.
And
at the time, the height weight requirements, there was no thing as BMI and stuff. And so the body mass index or whatever. So they're like, hey, you're too heavy for your height. You need to lose weight. But he was just a big corn-fed Texas boy that played football. And it's like, I can't lose the muscle mass that I have.
Yeah.
So he did other things.
So one of the things you said in the notes that I wanted to follow up with you on, especially as we think about how we're training up our kids, is to not compare ourselves to others. And that just stuck out to me because I feel like we're such a culture of comparison. Why is that important to you? And then why is that important for you to teach that to your boys?
So you probably heard this growing up, keeping up with the Joneses. I think this day and age is keeping up with the Kardashians or whatever famous influencers out there. Realize that I say this because my 3 youngest sons, they don't know how to ride bicycles. And it did bother myself and my wife for a little bit because they didn't want to learn. And there was times where I was almost frustrated to the point where I was kind of angry with them because they didn't want to ride, but they just didn't show any interest. They wanted to ride on scooters and do other things. And so sometimes seeing other kids like, oh, this kid's like 6 years old and cruising around his bicycle. I love riding bikes. It's something I do to keep healthy and whatnot because my injuries, I can't go just for a run or whatnot. But my kids, just weren't interested, and at this point still aren't. My oldest, it's the same thing. I got him bikes with training wheels when they were really young, and they were all excited for a little bit, but then it's a different time, lots of technology, obviously, and just different stuff that they're interested in.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things like you see other people and you compare to yourself too as a kid. You're like, well, when I was a kid, I used to do this, go wandering around until the lights came on in the neighborhood and stuff. And it's like, it's a different time, different era. And the biggest thing is, your kid's happy, healthy, and are growing at the end of the day. So whatever they're doing, what kind of inputs they're getting, just because they can't, the example, right, to ride the bike, just because they can't ride a bike doesn't make them less than the neighbor's kids or whatnot. Because, the neighbor kids, can't do some of the stuff that my kids can do because they're all individuals. Looking at your kids, it's not just your kids and looking at them as an individual person. Like they each got their own personalities. They each got their growths and their strengths, and they got their own weaknesses, So as soon as I like fully grasped that concept,
Mm-hmm.
it was one of those things like, you know what, I don't need to compare my sons to anybody else in the neighborhood, anybody kids their age. I can't compare them to me when I was their age, because it was different environments, different times, different eras of like everything, you know. So I was like, man, if I was around a kid at their age now with the internet and all the video games and stuff like that, it'd be a different, you know, time. But, you know, back then we didn't have that. So we entertained ourselves in other ways. And um, it wasn't, you know, just having your kids wander around in the streets until 8, 9 o'clock at night till the lights came on. Uh, people were more, people were less distracted by cell phones and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So people were more cognizant of situational awareness, going, oh, that's the Hahn boys riding by, you know,
Right.
and tracking stuff like that. But you think about, you know, I'm guilty of it too. You think about being an adult now, like I look out my window less and it's more
Mm-hmm.
TV or social media stuff. And it sucks because like I catch myself like, hey, I gotta stop that. And people just don't do that, especially, you know, people without kids. Like I remember a couple of my foster homes, a lot of people in the area without kids were, you know, older folks or just didn't have kids, and they weren't glued to a cell phone or something or doing something. They were either outside tending the gardens or something, or, you know, there's not as many nosy neighbors as they used to be. I think that's
Yeah.
the best way to put it. So it's a different time, a different environment. So I couldn't imagine my kids wandering around to 8, 9 o'clock at night, because there would probably no one be like, oh, I never saw your kid. It's like, what do you mean? Passed by your house probably 3 or 4 times. Because no one pays attention like that anymore as much as they
Yeah.
used to.
Yeah. A lot
Uh,
less social awareness. When you talk about that, it brings up this question that I like to ask guys, especially right around our age, you know, like early 40s. I mean, even 50s, you'd ask a dude. But what's something that you were maybe stuck in your ways in? You know, the bike's kind of a good example, but you're like, this is how it is. But then in being married and having kids, you've made a shift. So like, I'll give you my example. My example is like, I'm anti-dog. I think having dogs is a waste of time and energy and resources. And I know that's like the worst thing ever to say, but I finally realized that I was making it about me. My kids and my wife desperately wanted a dog. And I realized if I want to be selfless for my family, I'm going to get a dog. So anyways, we have a dog now. I
right.
still wouldn't say that I think it's the best decision ever, but is there anything that comes to mind for you that you're like, I was stuck in my ways on this and I shifted?
Um, yeah, diet. So
Okay.
big
Yeah.
thing growing up was eat your vegetables. Like I remember being force fed food that I absolutely hated, and I resented those. Well, I mean, kind of semi lucky for me. I bounced around different homes, but they were all pretty consistent with food, like vegetables, you know, meats, proteins. So when they were littler, and that's something we'd feed them like real food when they started eating, like, you know, vegetable, fruit, protein, and stuff like that. And they started transitioning to some of their own personality, saying what they liked and disliked and what they wanted more of, and it turned into um, you know, my middle son, my 8-year-old, he loves chicken nuggets, grapes, and strawberries. Like he could eat that for every meal. It's like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
pizza of his deal.
Yeah.
Um, and my wife kind of helped me set straight. She was like, "Hey, at the end of the day, are they actually eating and getting, you know, something from every one of these, you know, avenues?" I was like, "Yeah, well, they eat like yogurt and stuff like that, but they do a whole lot of the snacks and, you know, cheeses and whatnot throughout the day." But at the end of the day, it's like, "Oh, my kid's well fed. Um, are they healthy? Like they're not looking sickly or not getting sick
Yeah.
because of their diet? And you know, are they trying new things?" So every now and then, like that was my biggest shift was, all right, I need to not be such a food Nazi with these guys, and just as long as they're eating and encouraging them to make different decisions. Like my 10-year-old, he's slowly transitioning into like eating food with us. So he likes chicken and barbecue chicken, but before that, it was, you know, quesadilla, corn dogs, and
Yeah.
cereal
Yeah.
was pretty much was what he was living off of. He was living like a Marine back in the early Iraq days. And I was like, man, like you got to eat other food, and, you know, trying to hammer that to a 4, 5, 6-year-old who just goes, I like the taste of corn dogs and, you know, mac and cheese, and that's what I want to eat. If not, I'm just going to throw this big fit. And I don't know. I remember the first interactions with him, kind of getting frustrated with him, and him sitting there crying at the dinner table. I'm like, you're not going to get up until you eat all this food. If not, I'm just going to make you eat this tomorrow morning for breakfast. Then I like would sit there and I like, man, I resented that so much as a kid, and I was still kind of traumatized by it. Like, if somebody made me sit down and say, you're eating this tomorrow as an adult, I'd probably fight them. And it's stuff like that. I was like, man, I don't want my kid to hate eating or trying new things because it's forced on them. And for a whole long time, in my early teenage years and up to my like early 20s, I hated trying new things because I was so forced to, hey, you have to try this because it's good for you. And I'd end up trying it and hating it, or something was weird. I just like the whole thing of like, you can't, attract a fly with vinegar, only with honey kind of deal. So one of the things I'll encourage my kids and try to bribe them sometimes, but at the end of the day, as long as if they taste it or if they start getting kind of overly emotional about stuff, I'm like, I'll take a step back. I'm like, all right, well, basically try FBI negotiate them. Let's try just one bite or half a bite. If you don't like it, that's fine. Just let me know you tried it, and then we'll get you your chicken nuggets scraped for strawberries, or we'll get you yogurt. But we mix in, protein shakes and stuff like that. So at least they get the vitamins, nutrition they need. But yeah, the main thing that I've come to as an adult that I was super Nazi'd about when after they were born was the food deal. Like, you will eat all these different foods and you will like it because you need it. Your body needs it. Because that's the same thing we did. Food pyramid. If you're not eating vegetables, you're not going to grow and all that stuff.
Dude, I resonate with that, man. I even still today, I'm like, how many sodas have you had? How many pieces of candy you have? It's like exhausting. So like I've tried to say, okay, this is how much sugar I think you should have in a day. You manage it yourself and just walk away. But then as you're sharing that, I was thinking about my daughter, Violet. She's 16 now, but when she was like 4 or 5, dude, I'd make her eat whatever, say is broccoli. She would just hold it in her mouth. I mean, from the dinner table to the bathtub. And it would just be like, dude, a half an hour. I'm like, you're just tasting it the entire time. But it's like, dude, as a parent, it's funny the things that we get locked in on. It's like, this is so important. And then they end up growing out of it anyways. It's like all that energy I freaking wasted, kind of being a dick about it. Thinking about learning about ourselves, what's something you've learned about yourself as a father?
I guess how resilient I truly am. I had a pretty intense career in the Navy and going through a whole lot of physical stuff, but like mentality, some patience. Like, don't get me wrong, I've definitely lost my patience once or twice, but the ability to have that resilience of patience and be able to pull back when you're kind of losing your frustration is something that I've learned to master, I guess, as a father. So as I grow as a father and as my kids grow, there's less and less that bothers me about small things that I guess adults doing it would annoy me.
Yeah. That's
at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, they're kids, they're having fun. But sometimes like some people are like, oh, the kids are just being too loud and all they do is fighting all day. And I'm like, well, they're kids, that's what they do. I mean, they're not adults that are supposed to be doing some kind of day-to-day task, especially during the summer. The youngest one is, the instigator of the other two. So it's always every few minutes, one of them screams, "Gunner, stop that." And he'll come run around, do it again. Because he's bored. And at the end of the day,
it's fun.
It's fun. It's like kids are designed and built for fun. And they will do anything that's fun to them. It may not be fun to anybody else. But at the same time, you got to learn that, hey, just because it's not fun to me as an adult, no matter how crappy my day is or how long it is or who I had to interact with on the way home, I need to take that step back, take that breath, and realize walking through the threshold, there's going to be a lot of noises, a lot of different inputs.
Yeah, that's good.
But it's going to be like, hey, this is my family, these are my kids. And part of it's they're excited to see me because my youngest one, he gets this like fifth wind when I come home from work. He'll go from just relaxing because he's always burnt out a bunch of energy to see me come home. So he's all excited, gives me a hug, and then he'll buzz around. Kind of reminds me of like a young, like pretty much like a puppy. Get like the zoomies. He'll start spinning around. Then he'll run upstairs. He'll bug his brothers. So they start screaming and there's a fight going on. He'll come back downstairs, just giggling and laughing. And then I was like, I had to take that moment back instead of just screaming them and trying to redirect them like, hey, you need to stop that. It's like, hey, bud, you calm down a little bit, or come sit with me. Let's talk about your day or something. I gotta remember to distract them in a positive way instead of like disciplining him for being a kid. So there's a lot of things that I've learned. Like there's some things that, yes, discipline is necessary. But some things I see a lot of, or hear about a lot of people discipline their kids for being kids. Like, oh, they're too loud. So they did this, or they made a mess in their room. So I ended up spanking them or something. I was like, they're kids. They're going to make messes, encourage them to clean it up. But at the end of the day, does it really matter? Because 10 years from now, you're going to be wishing they had, messy rooms and wishing they were hearing them fight. And now they're just either hanging out with their friends or off to college, especially since my 17-year-old is in college now, my 10 and 8-year-old, in like 10 years, they're going to be 20 and 18. And even my 6-year-old is going to be 16. So it's like, man, that interaction, that giggle, that laugh, that playfulness, that childness is something that I'll definitely miss. So I got to take advantage of it now.
Dude, Joey, as you're sharing the story of like your kid running around being crazy kid, right? I pause and go, dude, look at what, and I know it's you and your wife, and I know there's other factors, but dude, look at what you've created in your home. Like when dad shows up, it feels so safe and so exciting. Your kid's like a puppy, right? He doesn't have some of these worries that other kids have, or maybe worries that you had of where am I going to be this weekend or that weekend. And dude, like all the freaking hard work you've done has set it up where your kid's not going to know all that, doesn't know all that. So dude, just, I mean, kudos to you and leaning into life and leaning into relationship and giving so much of yourself to, our country, this world, to people, to families. Thank you. I just wish you the best health and relationships and connections with those that, God puts in your path and in your life. And I just thank you, dude, for grinding so hard for the sake of making the most out of life.
I appreciate that. It's an honor and a privilege to be bestowed and have the ability to raise a family. Like it's not something that's promised to everybody. I definitely know a lot of couples that, can't have babies, or like I said, families kind of like my dad, where their families got taken away for something they couldn't handle at the moment, just being overwhelmed. But yeah, it's one of those things it's a very honorable, privileged thing to do. And I definitely would fight tooth and nail to, keep that sanctity of the home safe. And like I said, I posted something about it being a joke, but getting hired on by McDonald's or something like that. Nothing against people that work at fast food restaurants, but if that's what it took to provide for my family, I wouldn't hesitate. It's like one of those things. Like, you are a very small part of your child's life, but you are a big part. And a lot of people don't realize that. And nothing is permanent. Everything is constantly growing and evolving. And there's times when, you'll definitely get frustrated with your kids. But my challenge to those folks is, hey, go talk to your parents and grandparents and see where they sit now, and always pretend like, hey, if I was 70 years old and got granted one wish to come back in time, and this was the moment that I got, like, how would that make me feel? So instead of getting frustrated that the house is a mess and kids are everywhere and screaming, like, oh, wow, like this is the moment I need to realize and suck in and take in and appreciate. So.
And dude, if every dad just did that a little bit more, like our world would look different. It just would look different. And it's not hard, right? It's hard. It's simple. It's simple, but it is hard, and it is a choice, and it does take effort, but you're right. I mean, that's what we want. We just need to remind ourselves that it's what we want.
Yep. Definitely a duty and a choice to be, a father, a good dad anyways. Like, you can father sons and whatnot, but it's a very big duty, big choice, and a big honor to step up and be like, you know what, this is the future generations that the world will depend on. And that starts with how I raise him or her. Right.
Yes.
And the biggest thing is, hey, I got to make sure my kid's just a good person. It doesn't matter religious beliefs or anything like that. Like, hey, are you kind to yourself? Are you kind to others? Will you help the world and improving it in a better way, no matter what you believe or how you believe, politically, religiously, you know, anything else in between? It's like, hey, are you a good person to yourself? Because you always got to be a good person to yourself, good person to others, and are you contributing to bettering the world in some way?
Yeah, dude, well said. Joey, thank you. Much love to you and your family. Appreciate the man that you are. Thank you for spending some time sharing your life with me and for my listeners.
Awesome. Thanks, Ned. Pleasure's all mine, man.
All right, brother. Until next time. What an incredible conversation. I love the way that he communicated. I love his story from the childhood growing up to the man that he is leading his home now. I really love the part of you and I as fathers working to work ourselves out of a job. Like, are we thinking about that? That my opportunity here is that I'm not just going to be a parent parenting this kid for the rest of his life. My role will shift, and it's based not only on their age, but on the work that I do to prepare them for that age, right? Society might say this is what a 16-year-old can do, or an 18-year-old can do, or a 25-year-old can do. But what are you and I calling our sons, especially, into their abilities, and at what age? We don't have to wait for when this government says that our kid can do X, Y, and Z. And what I'm talking about is calling them into manhood, right? Calling them into manhood. You and I don't need to look at what everyone else is doing. What is right for our boys, our daughters at their ages. And we tell our kids regularly, this was right for your sibling or your sister, or your brother at this age, but it will be right for you when it's right for you. So, are you working yourself out of a job? All right, my friends, if these conversations are beneficial, it would be such an honor if you would share it with a friend. Like, send a text, hey, dude, you're a great dad, and I think you'd enjoy this conversation. And then also, if you can write a review, it helps spread the word that what you and I are doing every day as fathers matters. Thank you to all you dads out there listening to Fatherhood Field Notes podcast. What you do matters. Don't be like everybody else. Be yourself. That is who your kids, spouse, and community needs. This is your guide, Ned Shout. Together, let's rebel against the view that fatherhood has little impact and create lives engaged in mastering the craft of fatherhood. I look forward to hanging out with you next week.